All right, and welcome to Next Level Refs, our World Cup series, and I am very, very blessed to be joined by the wonderful Eugene Brazzale. How are you, Eugene?
G'day, Ben. Yeah, not too bad, mate. How you going?
Yeah, really good. And look, I'm really excited to have you on the line to be able to share your World Cup stories, because there's plentiful and an amazing World Cup that you were at, and you know, I'm sure the listeners will be able to take a bunch of information out, A, from the stories, but B, the experiences, and see some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. So, look, if you're happy, we might get straight into it, mate.
Let's get into it, mate.
Awesome. So, look, let us know straight away, where did it all begin for you? Where did you start your career course and your refereeing journey right from the very beginning?
Sure. I guess like a lot of referees, I actually started playing before I started refereeing, and there was a local club not too far from here that had been set up back in the middle 70s, would you believe? That's how old I am. FC Bulleen Lions, part of the Veneto club here in Melbourne, a bunch of Italians from the north of Italy setting up a club. And so the FC Bulleen Lions club was set up in 1974, and would you believe I was part of their first junior team, the under-15s, back in the middle 70s, and played a couple of years there, 4 or 5 years, and then moved my way into playing for the reserves, captained the reserves, was top goal scorer, never fit enough to make it to the seniors, but was on the bench for a couple of games, but enjoyed my football. It was a good place to meet friends and that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, I succumbed to an injury one training night when I was about 20 years old, and I dislocated a shoulder at training. And over the ensuing couple of months, it kept on popping out, training and games, etc. I thought, shit, I've got to do something about this. But the advice I was getting from the medicos then was that there was no guarantee. So I thought, well, what do I do? And that time, one of my teammates, who was actually the captain coach of the first team, said he wanted to do a refereeing course just to improve his knowledge of the game. And you may know him, Carlo Grazer. I went with him to do the course, and bang, I was hooked. Met a couple of really smart, motivated gentlemen who basically filled me with a lot of interest in the laws of the game and how they influence the game, etc. And I thought, bang, I want to do this, and I became fairly serious at it, and so I applied myself fairly diligently. It's funny, I couldn't ever get fit when I was playing, but when I started refereeing, because I could see sort of a pathway there, I thought, yeah, I've got to do this properly. So that's how I started, mate.
And so, what age were you when you did that course?
So 20 going on to 21. Yep. So that's and I know these days it's well advised to start a little younger, but back then that was my starting point. Yeah,
fantastic. And well, I'm glad you and Carlo took that course, mate. That's fantastic. Yeah. All right. So obviously growing up in Melbourne, and you start that career, how did you start stepping through the ranks? Let's say from the juniors through to the seniors in Melbourne. How did you find that process?
Yeah, look, there wasn't as much structure back then as there is these days. And so, I do the occasional juniors, and then I do the occasional senior games, etc. I showed a bit of talent, I guess, a bit of aptitude for it. And so it was probably a number of years after that, probably 7 or 8 years into my refereeing journey, that I got nominated to go to the Nationals. And as a side note, I travelled on the same plane as the Victorian team going to the Nationals, which were at Parklea, the centre in Sydney.
Still up at Valentine Park at Parklea.
Yeah. and lo and behold, on the plane was the Victorian team, and one of them was the captain, who happened to be Kevin Muscat. So 15-year-old Kevin Muscat.
Yep.
So I've come across him a number of times in my refereeing journey, so that was quite a learning experience for me, as you know, having been involved with many nationals, and then from that I started getting games as an assistant referee in the National League back then, the NSL, the old NSL. Back in the late 80s, early 90s. So
you went to nationals. You're doing both juniors and seniors in Melbourne. Obviously, showed enough, to your work in Victoria that the Victorian referees nominated you to the nationals.
Correct.
This is for our younger viewers that probably might not know those steps back then. You've gone off the nationals, learnt a heap in that week, no doubt. Lots of different football, lots of different referees. You've come back to the Victorian Premier League as it probably was back then. And how many years do you reckon post nationals before you then got nominated to the National League as you were at there?
Yeah, probably 2 years. So I'd say late 80s, early 90s we're talking. So seems like a lifetime ago, but so the memory's a little bit fuzzy, Ben, but so probably 2 years, and that period, a lot happened in a very short period of time. So I was running lines in the National League. I ended up running, I think, 2 lines in grand finals for national leagues. So that was good. But at the same time, if you recall, the 1990 World Cup in Italy was a bit of a disaster when it came to officiating, especially in relation to the lining, the assistant referees, because it seems like I said, a lifetime ago then, but back then there wasn't a specialist list of ARs, and they chose a bunch of referees from around the world to go to tournaments, and any of those that weren't doing middles, they were given flags and say, run a line, right? So unsurprisingly, there were lots and lots of problems in games, mostly to do with the lining aspect of the game. And so from that, FIFA learned a lesson, and they set up what they determined to be the solution, and that is to have a specialist list of ARs, train them up. That's all they do, and they go to World Cups and they shoot the lights out. That was the theory, I guess. And so
that was about 92, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, correct.
92 became the specialist assistants. Yeah, that's right.
So in my case, it was a case of, by that stage, I'd had a couple of seasons of running lines. I got nominated to go on the FIFA list of ARs, or it was called the linesman back then.
Oh, right, yeah.
But then in 92, I started refereeing in the National League. So here I was with a FIFA linesman's badge, and I was hardly ever running lines. I was basically whistling. So 92, then 93, I had a full season of refereeing. Ended up being referee of the year for the old NSL in 93. And yet, through circumstances, which I'm happy to go into, got chosen to go to the World Cup as a lino.
Yeah. And so obviously we're talking about the 1994 World Cup in the USA, which was a big moment for FIFA, really, to move away from some of the more traditional countries, if you will, especially off the back of Italy, and the US being a huge market, the population of well over 250,000 then. So that must have been a really weird time, because obviously Australia was still part of Oceania back then. So I'm interested, Eugene, even before we get to the World Cup part, in that time from getting a badge on the lines, refereeing in the middle at the NSL, did you go off to different Oceania tournaments with your linesman's badge on prior to that?
Not so much, and again, I hark back to the fact that back then it wasn't as organised or as planned as it is these days. Did do a number of World Cup qualifying games in all sorts of exotic places, Ben, in the Pacific.
What were some of those, mate, that you remember?
Oh, let's talk about Vanuatu,
Mm-hmm.
Solomon Islands, New Zealand was a mainstay. So going over and running lines there, and the standard of football was what it was. Australia was head and shoulders above any other team in that confederation. And I think generally it was a wonderful thing that we became part of Asia, the AFC, because to improve our standard of football, we need to play against better opposition. But from a personal perspective, I had a number of games in the Pacific Islands, which are great memories for me.
Yeah, and that was from 92?
From 92 to 93. So again, even though I was refereeing in the old National League, I was running lines for World Cup qualifying games, basically.
Yeah.
But the real sort of launching pad was the 93 FIFA Youth World Cup, which was held here in Australia.
And 20s, right?
Yeah, so that was a terrific tournament. You may well remember that you're probably a very young tacker back then.
I was. I remember going to games at Bruce Stadium here in Canberra. That's right.
Yeah. So a number of us on the FIFA Lions list in Australia were selected as part of the the list of ARs for that tournament, and I was lucky enough to head off to Brisbane for a couple of weeks for the group stage of those games. And so a mixture of us here from Australia and referees and also ARs from other parts of the world. So really the first taste for what it was going to be like. And we were given, as heading the delegation in Brisbane, if you like, was a FIFA instructor, a Belgian ex-FIFA referee, then instructor, a guy called Alexis Poney. And what a wonderful gentleman he was. Terrific, again, upholding the purity of the game, how wonderful the game is, and making sure that, we were doing all the right things, but also enjoying ourselves. And out of that, at the end of that tournament, we were congregated in Sydney to celebrate, this upcoming semi-finals and final. And I think we were on a boat on Sydney Harbour, and I was approached during, festivities, drinking mineral water because there were still games to come that you'd hope. Right. But so the then secretary of FIFA, a guy called Michel Zenruffinen, maybe a name that you're familiar with, approached me, and he had in tow the head of Australia referees. Back then was Gary Power. So the two of them came up to me and they said, "Listen, we've got a dilemma and we'd like to know whether you can help us with this dilemma." and so I said, "What the hell is this all about?" Anyway, so Michelle went on to explain that I had impressed during the tournament, and they wanted to take me to the World Cup in the USA the following year. And the dilemma was that the Australian Federation, so Gary essentially, was about to nominate me for a FIFA referee's badge for 94, which meant that, well, I wouldn't be able to go to the World Cup. So they basically left it in my lap. They said, "Mate, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to the World Cup as an AR, or would you like to get your FIFA referee's badge a year earlier? Because when you do come back, we'll give it to you." Well, it took me about a nanosecond, Ben, as you can imagine, to make my feelings known. So that's how that eventuated.
Yeah, and that was going to kind of be the next question around, the moment and how far ahead from the World Cup you found that out. So what kind of time frame was that? Usually the World Cup's the middle of the year.
Yeah. So that tournament here in Australia was about March, I think, April, from memory, in 93. And so it gave me a year to digest it and to trust the process, because, things could go wrong as well. So so a little bit of trepidation there. But, so it was about a year ahead of time.
Yeah, okay. And so now obviously there's, as we know, there's no guarantees in football. So there's That was a conversation, well over 12 months ahead of a tournament. No doubt that would have just filled you with motivation. So what was your mindset after that around moving forward between then and the World Cup? I'm good with a flag in my hand. I'm good with a whistle in my hand. Where do I've got domestic duties in the NSL in the middle, but I've got to make sure I'm prepared on the line. Talk us through that process.
Yeah. So again, we're talking early to middle 90s, and I think FIFA have learnt a lot, and confederations have learnt a lot and changed a lot for the better in terms of the way they prepare referees. Having been intimately involved in the last 10 or so years, I can sort of testify to the fact that it's much better organised, planned, strategically worked out how to best prepare referees. Back then, I've got to say there was very little preparation. The only it was sort of left to the self, left up to me, and so for me it was a case of making sure I stayed fit, making sure that I was prepared to drop anything and be wherever they wanted me to be, which basically entailed nothing up until probably March, April of '94, where there was the list came out. Okay, and I was on the list, and they required us to be in Dallas, Texas, for a pre-tournament seminar and fitness testing. So I ended up doing that, but in terms of what I'd done previously, I was refereeing. I was refereeing the lights out on the old NSL. Like I said, I was referee of the year, so I was getting some top quality games. And there was no talk of me doing lines and also middles. It was basically, refereeing. So it did sort of. I wasn't concerned, to be honest. I thought, I'll be able to flick the switch whenever it's needed. Supremely confident, I guess. But so I did make sure that I ran. I said the occasional World Cup qualifying game in Oceania, yes. But then as it got closer to March, April, May, I was requesting here in Victoria to run NPL lines, so top level Victorian games, which was quite interesting because going from that to a World Cup was quite a leap up. But anyway,
I was going to say there'd be plenty of players that wouldn't have even been aware that their matches were being used for World Cup preparation. So
what the hell, you do what you have to do,
That's right. So now, obviously, we've got the trio set up, particularly in the male side of things. The women's, it's still sometimes there's trios, sometimes there's not. But back then it was very different, and often through Oceania, it might be that there was one referee and one assistant from the same country, and then you'd kind of get paired up a little bit that way. I guess the '94 World Cup was a little bit different in that obviously you're representing Australia, but you're representing Oceania as well. And we had two Australians in that, being Gordon Dunster being the other one, fellow Canberran, with yourself for that World Cup. There was no one else, no one in the middle from Oceania, no?
No.
You were both Oceania's representatives. So,
yes, that's right.
So you went through those processes together, that pre-session in Dallas. How did you go into that mentally, thinking, geez, here I am again, I've had a taste at the 93 under-20s where there's refs from around the world. I'm meeting all these new people, all these new cultures and everything as well. How did you, when you arrived in Dallas, thinking, wow, these are the other guys that I'm going to be with for what is the world's biggest sporting event?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Ben, because I firmly believe in a positive way that you fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah.
And even though we may not have had the experience of the Europeans or the South Americans in terms of high intensity situations and games of really, those really high intensity games of that you find in Europe and South America. I strongly believe, and when I'm coaching young referees, I use the term that I think you can actually do whatever you need to do for 90 minutes, whatever it is. You can actually achieve it. Put your mind to it, and for 90 minutes you can do it. All right, and that's the sort of mindset I took to it. And when I was in that environment, say for example, back in March, April, the pre-tournament, we were given a lot of instruction. We were given intensive sort of training, and we did a big fitness test at the old Cooper Centre, a name that you might be familiar with. And it was, the world's media was there. There was a lot of attention given to, back then, Sepp Blatter was the Secretary General, and he actually gave a lecture to referees on how he wanted tackles from behind handled. And fresh in his mind was Marco van Basten having to give up the game because of tackles on his Achilles. And he gave those examples, and he made it quite clear that come June, when the tournament was starting, that was not going to happen in his tournament. So, so there was a lot of, I guess, pressure, and I was there and Gordon, acknowledging Gordon's, we sort of went through the whole process together, and we were terrific sort of backups for each other, providing moral support. And so we just stepped up, to the degree that that come the tournament proper, and there's a whole story behind it. But we ended up doing the opening game. So yeah.
So I guess just before we get to that, and we're talking about that opening game being Germany-Bolivia. Before we get to that, so you've done the March, April, that preparation tournament. You obviously come back to Australia with I guess not that motivation would have waned, but certainly a renewed sense of enthusiasm and excitement. Hearing about what the tournament's going to be like from Blatter. This is what we want you to focus on, etc. To the time where I'm guessing you and Gordon flew together, and you touched down and you went to the team hotel. Talk us through that arrival at the FIFA World Cup in one of the, I guess, most populous countries of the world, prior to that first game.
Yeah. So again, it was quite interesting in that back then a guy called Dr. Andrew Cooper had an affiliation with FIFA, and if you recall, I think in your time you may have done the Cooper test as a fitness test.
Yep.
Which emanated from this guy, and he had it would have been like a 20-acre property in the middle of Dallas that was basically a world-renowned cardiology place where people with issues pertaining to their heart would go, and it'd be like a ranch, and there'd be a multitude of physicians there, from doctors, cardiologists, physios, all sorts of physicians. And the facilities were enormous, including huge motel type facilities. And that's where we stayed for the pre-tournament and also for the tournament. It was used as the base for referees. So Dallas was the base for the first 4 weeks of the tournament. And so when we touched down in Dallas, that's where we ended up going. We were there for a number of weeks, and you'd fly out 2 games, then come back in, and then so it was used as the base. So over the ensuing 2 or 3 days, people were coming in from all over the world, and it was great to see some friends, because a lot of those guys that were referees and ARs had come here to Australia for the '93 World Youth Championship. So it was good to see a lot of people that I'd worked with before, and just to swap stories as to their journey for the years that we hadn't seen each other. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, amazing. And that is that sense of camaraderie. And I'm guessing that tournament back in '93 leading into gave you that confidence to go, well, actually, no, I belong at this level. And here's all these other guys that have kind of been, even though we're from different parts of the world, we've been on a similar path, and here we all are in Dallas, ready to undertake what's the biggest sporting event in the world. So
Yeah.
That's a great little understanding for people, Eugene, of that kind of arrival part, and you're sitting down, getting ready. There would have been the training and everything. Eventually, you would have all been sat in a classroom, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And they announced the very first appointment. Talk us through that moment, mate.
No, that's probably how it has happened recently, but it was a really weird sort of situation.
Okay.
So arrived, had a couple of days there. Everyone's in. Opening games in 3 days' time. Fitness test is tomorrow, let's say. So everyone's getting ready for the fitness test. And that night I go to bed, and about midnight I hear something being pushed under my hotel room, all right, like an envelope. And I think, shit, what's this? So, obviously not able to sleep. So got the envelope, had a look at it and thought, right. So this is midnight before, and basically it said, you've been appointed to the opening game in Chicago with Arturo Brazzale from Mexico as the referee.
Yeah.
And Gordon as the other AR.
Yeah.
Please have your bags packed by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. You'll be flying out to Chicago. You will not be required to do the fitness test.
That's a win-win.
Yeah, well, I guess it was more a tick the box exercise, the fitness test 2 days before the tournament start. We had done the fitness test weeks earlier in March, April.
Yep.
And so, that's the way they approached that. So, we took off the next morning and made our way to Chicago. So, again, if there are any sort of feelings of shit, do I belong? How do I stack up? I haven't run lines at all. And here I am with a linesman's badge on my chest. So, well, these guys have got the faith, and so just bring the game, bring your A game to just focus, and then that's the attitude I took. So it was
and that's a magnificent attitude, because I guess lots of younger, or maybe not even younger, referees will be listening to this thinking, geez, I've been appointed to XYZ game, team A versus team B. This is a big game, and you could go one of two ways. You can go one and, crap your pants, so to speak, or like you said, well, clearly they've got the faith in me to do this job. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been appointed.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the right positive the mindset towards that. So, and for those that don't understand tournament football, obviously the final's the biggest thing, right? But almost the opening game of a tournament, especially a World Cup, it's almost right up there with the final, because the way they set up a tournament, especially with Bladder coming out and saying, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and you're not going to allow this and you are going to allow this, entrusting you guys, that's a big thing, because that sets the bar from the very first whistle, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And and we did have a send-off in that first game. Echeverria from Bolivia came on as a substitute, and he decided to throw his weight around, and Brazzale Carter, it happened right in front of me, in fact, but there was no need for me getting involved, because Brazzale Carter was having none of it, and bang, see you later, fella.
Yeah, fantastic.
Just in regards to the attitude, it'd been my dad was an immigrant from Italy, and he finished school when he was 9 years old, so not a very educated man, but very street smart, and he had a really good morals, etc. And he always taught me that, when you're on the dance floor, you got to dance, mate. On the dance floor, dance. Don't. So if you've been putting
that's
it.
I was going to say, there's not too many bigger dance floors than that one, mate. The opening match of a World Cup, fantastic.
Yeah.
Glad to see you packed your dancing shoes. All right, so then that takes us, and look, there's 5 matches you were involved in at a FIFA World Cup. 5 matches, that's just unbelievable. That takes us to the second one. It was Nigeria and Bulgaria. What was the kind of time difference between that opening match? Because no doubt you would have had a bunch of nerves. The game's done. Fly back to Dallas, almost come down a little bit, and then probably back into the training side of things. And then how long do you remember roughly before you got the nod for Nigeria and
So the first 4
Nigeria?
games came pretty quick and snappy. They were one after the other, and in fact, the second game was actually in Dallas. Rodrigo Bardia from Costa Rica was the Aztec god in charge of that game, and that was good fun being with him. He'd been here in Australia, so I knew his character. He was very flamboyant sort of fella, and it was Nigeria's first foray into World Cup finals. So it was their very first game, and they shot the lights out there. I think they ended up scoring 3 goals and winning 3-0, including a goal that I think was made famous by the very first goal they scored in the World Cup final was the fella scoring a nice goal, but then continuing his run through to the net and putting his fists outside the net and clenching his fists, and just sheer joy of having scored his country's first ever World Cup final goal. So it was a terrific experience. And then the ensuing games were both in Washington, and the one after the other was one on I can't remember the days, but it was one after the other. One day and was Italy, Mexico, and the next day was Saudi, Belgium. So there was no rest for the wicked, mate. It was just go, go, go.
And look, obviously, like you mentioned, your dad's come from an Italian background, and the name like Brazzale, it doesn't. Was there any talk about you being on Italy, or how did that feel? Italy, Mexico, that's some game too, right?
Well, it was the final game of the group stage, and Italy had to get a result to make it through the group, right?
Yep.
And I never thought I would get an Italy game. Okay, my dad was a huge football person. He loved football. He instilled the love of football into me. And the Italian national team was like, they were gods to him. And back then, Robbie Baggio, he actually Robbie Baggio comes from a town that's very, very close to where my dad comes from. Like 5 kilometres distance.
Yeah, wow.
And it was kind of bittersweet in a way, because my dad was quite ill at the time. In fact, he ended up passing away not too long after the World Cup. But to have him back home and having the sensation of course he's watching Italy, but there's his son standing next to the Italian captain as they're playing the national anthem, was just it just filled me with a lot of pride. And it was almost, don't want to sound soppy about it, but it was almost like a gift to him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And also
that's not soppy at all.
Yeah, knowing that relatives and friends back in Italy would be saying, "Oh, wow, who's that? Brazzale? I don't know that name." Like, so it was quite a highlight for me. And yes, so I had a camera that I gave to one of our liaison people. I said, just take photos, throughout the game. And they came back with this magnificent photo of the lineup of the teams with me in the middle and with the crowd in the background.
Yep.
And prior to coming back, I had it blown up and framed, and I gave it to my dad. And it was just it was a nice moment.
Mate, I can hear the emotion in your voice, and you get me a bit choked up as well, mate. It's fantastic, and that pride that 94 for some of our young viewers or listeners, they weren't even a thought at that stage. But to hear that, it feels like yesterday. And I lost my father 9 days after returning from the World Cup too, so I can 100% understand that pride there, mate.
Yep.
Wow, and like I said, Italy, Mexico, absolutely huge match. And obviously Italy went on to be finalists, and no spoiler alert there, but your man Roberto Baggio, very famously putting that ball over the
probably shouldn't have played, and they played him because he was their best player, and I was in the stands for that game, mate, and it was a 0-0 draw, and they went to penalties, and look what happened. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, we're not quite at the final yet. So Italy, Mexico, and I'm guessing there would have been a gazillion Mexicans too that have come up as well to cross the border to support their team at the World Cup. So that would have been fantastic. And like you said, then the next one straight into Belgium, Saudi. Again, two very different footballing countries. What do you remember about Belgium, Saudi?
Well, it was my opportunity to work with one of the world's best referees, Helmut Krug, refereed that game. He'd also been to Australia, so I knew Helmut fairly well. And so that was a highlight. The standout moment for that game was it was a 1-0 result to Saudi.
Wow.
And if you ever have a look at, if you Google best 10 goals in World Cup finals, the guy that scored the goal for Saudi comes up. This, I think it was the talisman, number 10 for Saudi, who picked the ball up in his defensive third. And the Belgium team weren't too shabby at that stage. They were a fairly decent European team. And this boy picked up the ball. So the run started in my half. And he weaved his way through the midfield into the attacking third and shot from outside the box and nailed it, right? And that was it, 1-0. Wow, the party in the the Saudis was unbelievable. So it was for me the memory of that goal. It was a great goal. Yeah.
Yeah, right, that's fantastic. And like you're recalling it like it's yesterday. I can.
Yeah.
You put me in the. Felt like I was on the line.
I can picture it being like it's just it was just a moment,
Yeah, amazing. So 4 games into a World Cup, fantastic. Group stage is done, and then another appointment. Are we still envelope under the door at this stage?
No, it's no, it wasn't like a midnight sort of type of thing, but it was certainly it wasn't in classroom setups, it wasn't in group setups, because everyone was traveling at the time, and it was sort of getting together a group of 4 or 5. Okay, your next assignment is such, and whatever. And I was lucky enough to have worked with Brizio, Carter, Badia. The Italy-Mexico game was Francisco La Molina from Argentina. So we're talking about, top referees, Helmut Krug, and there's one referee that I really wanted to work with, and lo and behold, he was he was probably the best referee in the world at that time, and I thought I'd love to work with that guy, and it ended up happening. So in the game, the round of 16.
Round of 16, Netherlands, Republic of Ireland. All right, so tell us about this one. And, of course, the man you're referring to is Peter Mikkelsen. Rest in peace, one of the absolute gentlemen of the game. Anyway, I'll pass over to you. This is your story, mate.
Yeah. Look, we were told the appointment, Peter, he had brought Christensen as an AR from Denmark and myself, with Fabio Baldas from Italy as 4th official. We were told about the appointment prior to the 2 teams being known. Certainly the Netherlands were through to that game, and it was in Orlando, Florida. And get this, it was going to be the 4th of July in Orlando, Florida. And had the results worked out a certain way, they were expecting Germany to make it through to that game, right?
Right.
And so they appointed Mikkelsen, his AR, and myself to potentially what could have been a Germany-Netherlands round of 16. And they had that fixture, they were expecting all sorts of fireworks, as you can probably understand the history behind those 2 set of supporters more than anything. As things worked out, in the final group stages, Republic of Ireland made it through to that game, and so I had the opportunity to go to the party capital of the US, being Orlando, Florida, 4th of July, to do what ended up being a fantastic game, and working with one of the best referees in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And what memories of the game did you have, both during and then, as you mentioned a couple of times, the party capital, maybe post match as well? So, firstly, the match. What do you remember of that?
So I think it was quite obvious from early in the game that Netherlands were a superior team, and they'd scored an early goal. Then they scored a second, so it was the result wasn't really beyond. It was fairly as expected, a Netherlands win. So throughout the sort of second half in particular, it was the music coming from the spectators. Like, we're talking about full-on brass bands.
Yeah.
Try and get that through the MCG, these days. So all these guys walking in with trumpets and drums and all sorts of stuff, and carrying on like party mode for the second half. So that was it. It was almost as if you were doing a samba on the line, So yeah, that was the game. It was a well-refereed game, result as expected. The Netherlands team was full of all sorts of, Bergkamp, Ronald Koemans, all these high-level stars, and they made it through. So yeah, it was good. And yeah, being 4th of July, we were lucky enough to have a couple of security escorts to a few bars around town after the game, and drinking mineral water, of course. But just enjoying some of the nightlife. Yeah, it was good.
I'm guessing the Larry FIFA jacket that they used to bestow back then might have been left in the team bus for those little moments.
Oh, look, it was a case of job not being done yet. So there was still a couple of weeks of the tournament to go. So it was making sure that and particularly working with a guy that had the utmost sort of standards. That it was a really good. You can still have a good time, but within the confines of accepted behaviour. So it was good. It was good learning.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, what was you probably answered it there, really, around the mindset of, well, I've just done 5 games at the World Cup, including a round of 16. A lot of people will think, our referees will go into different tournaments, whether it's Kanga Cup here in Canberra or what have you, thinking, well, I want to do the final. Other times people might think, well, you know what, I've done 1, 2 or 3 games, and I've probably cooked my goose, so to speak. So it was really, really interesting to hear you talking about that mentality of, wow, we've just had these moments, but that final whistle for the tournament hasn't been blown yet.
Yeah.
And we're all still in the mix, So
so the attitude that I take to that, and this is something I learned from those guys, working at the top, is that there's a lot of element of luck, right, in what happens. But the wise Chinaman said that the harder you work, the luckier you get, right?
Yes.
And so you don't want to be closing yourself off to opportunities because of the fact that you switch off for a split. So there are times to have to let your hair down and sort of really relax. But there are also times when job's not done yet. We've done well. Job's not done. Work hard and continue the journey. That's the attitude I would like to sort of teach our younger refs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Certainly they can be way too serious and not enjoy the moment. But there can also be the other way as well. So you're right. It's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Savouring the moment, but still realising, there's plenty still to come, and you want to be there. And I love that. I love that Aussie mentality. That we're still in the fight here.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Obviously that round of 16 did end up being your final match, so to speak, for the tournament. But knowing you and knowing a little bit of the story, it didn't quite end there for you. So, and I'm talking about the great Pete Mickelson, who I agree was one of the world's top referees and top blokes. And for those that don't know Peter, he sadly passed away. He was one of our instructors through the 2014 process, and I have a bunch of amazing memories of Pete, including sitting in the back of our our classroom in Zurich, and I had the German referee turn to me and say, "Benny, what about question number 23?" And Pete didn't let us know until dinner that night when he came over and said, "Oh, one of the things I love about FIFA, the FIFA family, is teamwork. Even during the laws of the game test," he said, So, but he loved it. It meant that it certainly tees up with what you talk about, him knowing the family and that we're all in it together. So,
yeah.
I'll let you take over from there, Eugene.
Yeah, look, I guess the story didn't end there because a lot of so after the round of 16, a lot of refs and assistant refs were let go home. So they, you know what tournaments are like. They keep just a tight group for the remaining games, and I was lucky enough to be kept, which was fantastic. So I thought, this is pretty good. Worst case scenario is I'll get to go to a good couple of games.
Yeah.
But I guess what you're referring to is the fact that, and this is something that I came to know after the event, but apparently I did quite well during the tournament. News filtered back to me that I'd come in second on the list of ARs in terms of merit for the games, and as was widely expected, it was widely expected that Peter Mickelson was going to get the nod for the final, and it didn't eventuate. Eventually, it didn't eventuate, and so there were some discussions just prior to the final that things had been changed, and that the referee committee had nominated Peter Mickelson for the final, and that it wasn't accepted by the then president of FIFA. These were the rumours that I was hearing.
Yep.
Which meant that Peter had missed out. So the widely acclaimed, acknowledged, probably best referee of that era, with hadn't stuffed up during the games in his previous games in that tournament, and had no controversies. Apparently had been given the game and then taken off. So that was a big shock, and he came to know this, and it obviously affected him quite emotionally, quite badly. So having become friends with him, we shared a good number of hours together, sort of consoling and discussing it. So that was a good story.
Yeah, and like you said, there are those moments, and we've said it before, that there's no guarantees in football, and I guess until you're walking across that line with a whistle in your hand and the ball ready to kick off, we're not there. But at the same time, I'd be really interested in your mindset, thinking that, even for us to be spoken of in that breath, obviously you'll have your own personal take, but Eugene, me knowing that story of yourself being, not just penciled in, it was probably pen and then white-outed by the sounds of it, for the FIFA World Cup final, shows the respect that the game has for yourself, and your standing in the game. Not bad for a bloke who was actually a FIFA referee too. So, but yeah, so obviously very good mates with Pete. Probably bitterly disappointed at the time. How did you navigate that little time together?
Yeah, so we sort of there was a lot of soul searching and a lot of opening up of emotions. He obviously had been given the game, and I was to be his EAR for that game, for the World Cup final.
Yep.
Didn't work out that way. Politics got involved, and that's the way it goes. And so. And he had a very pragmatic approach to it. Once the emotion sort of is dulled down by a few glasses of red, you sort of look at the reality of it. And I very much take the attitude of it was a fantastic ride, and a lot of things had to go my way for me to get to a World Cup, to have 5 games, and then to sort of progress and do well. A lot of things had to go my way. And so if you're happy enough to take the positives and ride the wave when it's going your way, then I think you've just got to accept the fact that sometimes it doesn't go your way, and it's no good cursing and carrying on and bitching about it. You just take it, and you move on, and take the positives out of it and learn, and then you move on. So that was generally the attitude that both Peter and I had towards that situation.
Yeah, and that's a great attitude, because otherwise that stuff hangs around our neck and drags us down, and I guess doesn't allow us to progress. So there's always going to be disappointments, and I guess that that's one of our other questions, is what were some of those most difficult times in your World Cup or your refereeing journey, and more importantly, how did you get through those things, and what support did you receive? Because like you said, it's not always a linear progression, is it, when we have those things? So what were some of those? Obviously, you've mentioned that one, which is huge. What were some of the hard times, and I guess how you got through that, Eugene?
Yeah, look, I guess throughout my career, and also the way that I coach and the way that I the attitude that I try to instill in young referees is that control the controllables, do what you can to put yourself in a position to take advantage of luck when it comes your way, And so even throughout my let's call them my younger years of refereeing, I knew that I probably wasn't ever the fittest or the most technically gifted or whatever, but I knew that one thing that was within my control is I could work hard, right? I could work harder than the next bloke, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to give that up to chance, So if you've done the underlying work, then you put yourself in the window, and so that's something that I like to teach young referees, that don't get caught up in the appointments of this or that fellow is just not as good as me. Why is he getting the games, and et cetera, et cetera. You do what you can to put yourself in a position, all right? And generally that'll mean that you'll get opportunity. So that's for example, having come back from one World Cup, it was my dream to go to a second World Cup as a referee. I just wanted to achieve that, right? And I worked my butt off for a couple of years after I came back from the World Cup, and lo and behold, in 1998, the next World Cup, I was actually referee of the year again in the NSL, and I wasn't chosen to go. My good mate Ed Lenny went to that World Cup, and good on him. Good luck to him. I knew that I had given it everything. So, and be it whatever the reasons were, I didn't get there. Well, that's the way it goes.
And look, that's a very important lesson to learn, Eugene, that you mentioned there, that you can now, from what you're saying, you did everything within your power, and sometimes who would believe that there's politics in football? But, all the things within your own power, and you can look yourself in the mirror and go, well, yeah, I did everything I could, as opposed to sitting on that chair in 20, 30, 40 years' time going, oh, I should have done this or I could have done that. You just went and did it. So, and one of the fine reasons why we're sitting here talking to one of Australia's World Cup officials, mate, that's bloody fantastic. Now, you imparted a bit of advice there. What's some of the best advice that you've ever received? Who was that from, and I guess what did that mean to you?
Yeah, look, I mentioned earlier that there were a couple of older fellas here when I first started here in Victoria. One was a Scotsman called Bob Henderson. Bob had refereed, I think he was a FIFA referee in Scotland, had refereed many of the old firm derbies, and found his way here in Victoria. And he had a reverence for the laws that really was striking to me, and was really it really hit me that this is the sort of attitude you need to have towards laws. How important it is to know the laws, to apply them, but also have an understanding of And he used to often say, he used to put a question to me, a law of the game question, and he'd look at me because I wasn't answering. He goes, Eugene, there's 40,000 Rabbit supporters out there, and they're waiting for you to make a decision. What are you going to say? And so yes, knowing the laws, but then being able to sort of interpret them and giving what the game needed at that point in time. And that was his sort of essence. And another fella, unfortunately, again, like Bob, has passed away in the last couple of years, a guy called Roger Lamb, an Englishman who came out to Melbourne, who again had the same sort of reverence for the laws. But his root, his foundation was okay. So you've got this part of the law telling you that this is the answer, and then you might interpret it this way. And his call was, what do you think is fair? Like, what do you think is fair? Given that situation, what do you think is fair? And so that was also impressionable on me, you know. So those two fellas, and I'll mention another name, and if he hasn't been part of your series yet, I certainly encourage you to talk to Chris Bambridge. What a huge figure he was in my refereeing journey, as a mentor, as a coach, and then as a friend as well. Someone who, again, holds the game to the highest esteem, and I have a lot of time for what he's done, what he's achieved, and the attitude that he instilled in me towards the game.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. In fact, we lost Tony Boscovich, as you know, who was the first Australian to referee the World Cup, or 2 World Cups, and then Chris was our next cab off the rank in terms of 1986. We have, you know, I sat down with Chris, and like you, he was instrumental in my career too, and I guess before my experience going off to Brazil, I was lucky enough to sit down with yourself and pick your brains, as well as picking Chris's too. And it's something I think in Australia we really need to learn from the past and those that have gone on and done it, rather than letting these stories like we're doing today, you know, drift off into the sunset, not to be told. I think we owe it to the likes of Chris and yourself and all the other men and women that have gone on and done that. I think it's really important to share those stories, because you know, we're all that once upon a time we're all that little boy or that little girl that's starting out in our refereeing career, and if we can learn from those that have been there and done it, I think it's a fantastic thing that is good for Australian refereeing. So, and no doubt there'll be people looking at this, you know, from around the world too, and learning as well. So it's a great opportunity to sit down with you as well. So, look, we're almost at the end, Eugene. But to sum up things really for your World Cup, you've mentioned some amazing stories and moments there. I'm gonna put it on the line there. What's your best memory of FIFA World Cup '94 USA?
A lot, Bed. There are a lot there. I will mention one story that is really dear to my heart, because it sort of it gave me faith in humanity, to be honest. As I mentioned, we were given the appointment of the opening game, and we chuffed off on a plane to go to Chicago 2 days before the game. The day before the game, I was at the hotel, which also happened to be the hotel where all the FIFA delegates were assembled, and they were having a congress. If you remember, back in those days, they used to have the Congress, FIFA Congress, where all the delegates get together, and it's usually a day or two prior to the opening game. And nervous as all hell. What's the next couple of days going to bring to me? Go out of my room, down into the foyer of the hotel. I think it was the Ritz-Carlton or something, some 6-star hotel somewhere, in Chicago. And in the corner of one room, near the foyer, I could see a horde of press, and there were cameras, like TV cameras, press cameras, guys with, would have been about 20, 25 people, and they were gathered around one person who was sitting in an armchair being interviewed. And I thought, gee, that's what's going on there. So I sort of go over and start peeping up, and the guy that's being interviewed puts up his head, And he looks at me, he goes, "Ah, Eugene." I thought, what the? And it was Ferenc Puskás.
Oh,
Right? Ferenc Puskás was being not nominated, he'd been accepted as a legend of the game, so FIFA Hall of Fame type of thing. And he was going to be presented at the Congress with this, humongous award. And for those that listen to this,
for those that don't know Puskás, can you quickly explain his importance?
So Ferenc Puskás, a Hungarian guy that back in the 60s was seen at the level of a Pelé or in now terms Maradona or a Messi. He was just a wonderful, wonderful player, and won Champions Leagues. He represented Hungary, and pushed them forward to levels they'd never reached before. And the reason for the connection was that out of the blue, he came and actually coached in Melbourne, right?
Yeah,
so
wow.
Then, for a couple of years, South Melbourne, like a very progressive sort of forward-thinking club here in Melbourne, and this is where Ange Postecoglou learned some of his basics, or his love for the game and love for the attacking side of the game was from Ferenc Puskás, right? And in fact, my very first NSL game was South Melbourne versus Apia, and Ferenc Puskás was the coach, and he remembered me from those days. Anyway, so he gets up from his chair, stops the interviews happening. He goes, "Give me a couple of minutes." So he parted away, and he came. We had probably a 15-minute chat about, and he was asking about South Melbourne, how the boys what's going on there, and it was like, here's this legend of the game, and he's taking time out of his day where this is his time. No, he's got time for someone else, a nobody like me. And I thought, that is how I want to be. That is the humility that is embedded in good human beings. And so that was a lovely, lovely easing my tension into the next day or so that was going to happen. So it was good.
Oh, well, what a story, mate! What a story! You saved that one till last, haven't you? That's amazing. And I was never aware that he coached in Australia, let alone at South Melbourne. Oh, fantastic! Could you imagine, for all the youngsters, could you imagine Lionel Messi, once his career finishes, coming out and coaching in Australia? So, amazing story. And look, really, to kind of summarise things, Eugene, we are lucky enough to have a lot of younger or inexperienced referees of all ages tune into Next Level Refs. What advice would you give them really about riding the highs and lows of our wonderful game and showing the persistence, as you've done, to work towards whatever goal they have?
Yeah, look, I've mentioned a few times, work hard, okay? Control what's within your controllables. Have resilience. Don't give up. If you love it, stick with it. Don't be put off by things that may go against you. Okay, and that may well be, maybe appointments, or maybe nominations to certain tournaments. Or maybe you think you're getting the raw end of the deal in terms of coaching or whatever. Don't let that put you off. Stay true to who you are. Keep on doing it and be resilient. Resilience is a very, very important part of it.
Yeah, very wise words, and obviously that kind of stuff that's been within you for all those times from the people that you've met, including your father, took you all the way to the World Cup, and to do it both with a FIFA badge as a referee and assistant referee. Mate, it's been an absolute honour to have you on board here today, Eugene, and on behalf of Next Level Refs and all of those people that will hear this, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know I've got a lot out of it myself personally, and I'm sure everyone else that listens and watches will, mate.
It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Eugene Brazzale, everybody. Get your notebook out and take the notes. Thanks again, Eugene. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.